Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have Binnie Klein. Binnie is a writer and radio host, and now a songwriter. Her new project, In These Trees with Tartie, is her debut album, and it came together in a magical way. Tartie, a singer-songwriter from Australia, submitted her work to Binnie on her radio show, A Miniature World, WPKN 98.5, that airs every first and third Thursday from 10 a.m. to noon. And while reviewing her submissions, she came across Tartie's music, and it really struck home with her. So much so that she reached out, and they began a friendship. And she sent lyrics that she wrote, and the two started sharing lyrics and music, and then it all came together. And the album they have out now is called The Quiver. And it's an amazing process. The internet, the way we can connect with people from across the world is pretty magical. And, you never think it's going to happen. And, it's hard to even fathom communicating with someone all the way from America to Australia, let alone working on a project like this. Anyway, we're going to get into it. We're going to listen to one of the tunes. This is Orchard, off the album The Quiver. The band is In These Trees with Tartie. Orchard is the name of the tune, In These Trees, and Tartie is the band, and The Quiver is the album. It's available now on all streaming platforms. The band likes if you hit them up through Bandcamp, like a lot of bands do. A lot of love there will help. So if you hear what you like, check it out. This was a really fun conversation. I really enjoyed talking with Binnie, and it's really interesting to talk with someone who kind of came into their perspective of songwriting on the other end. I'm like the DJ host, the person who's usually serving the song to the people. So it is a really cool perspective on songwriting from that aspect. Anywho, we're going to get into that conversation in a moment here. If you hear what you like, if you can rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Binnie and sharing their insights with you. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Binnie Klein. I wanted to ask you, and maybe, how should I put this? When he found that loves abound in a medieval type of melody.
Where did you get that from? That's not on the album.
I know it's not on the album. I did my research.
You tricky guy. No, I will try to explain, but must have been in some biographical info you found about my history with writing songs or attempting to write songs.
The reveal the source. I found your chat with Mike Watt.
Oh yes, my chat with Mike Watt. That in and of itself would make for an interesting subject.
Isn't? Oh. Watt's been one of our... So I play in a band, too, called C Level, letter C dash, and Watt's been one of me and my bass players, heroes. So this
no kidding.
Yeah, the whole reason I'm talking with you right now is because I reached out to Howard to talk to Mike.
Oh.
Yeah.
And so, wait a minute. So, did Mike Watt refer to me?
Was it? No, when I was just doing my research on you, I saw... in the interview you did with Mike Watt, that was a point.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's my first question.
It's something, I can tell you something funny, which is that with all my experience being a DJ, at a freeform station for multiple decades, I'm embarrassed, really, at how much I don't know. So when I was first hooked up to do an interview with Mike Watt, described to me as a punk 70s bassist, I was like, I don't know who that is. Are you sure this is a good fit? I started to tell people, colleagues at WPKN where I do a show, and they're like, Mike Watt.
Yeah.
You're going to have an interview with Mike Watt? Oh my God. And he's very, as you know, I'm sure, very revered. I started checking out Minutemen and the Stooges and realized that was probably when I was in kind of a bit of a musical coma. But, very interesting man, very interesting interview. And, of course, since he was asking me about my early UW, when he found that lies abound, I should have then found the entire lyrics for that early attempt at songwriting, because I can't recall the rest of the verse. But all I remembered was that first line, when he found that lies about, and it was, again, just as I had said or you said, it sort of had the quality of a medieval ballad and very different from anything that I've written for the album The Quiver. That's funny.
But it's all gotta start from somewhere. And like, I always find that origin story for any artist is kind of the most relatable part to someone who's maybe not an artist. So that's why I think it's such an impactful moment and like thing to address is the origin point of like when writing in this case, or writing music more specifically in this case, became kind of a mode of expression. So
what I began to put together when I looked at my own history in preparation for various interviews was that music has been an enormous part of my life ever since I can remember, even though I am not a performer, like I'm not a stage performer. Excuse me, I play piano, I play some guitar, not very well. But my actual first instrument, when I really think about it, was a little yellow plastic transistor radio. Right?
Yeah.
Now, it might not be it's not an instrument you play, but that's how sound and music and early, like, top 40 hits when I was growing up came into my ear. And, that little plastic yellow, I still have it.
I was just about to ask
and
that.
it has like a place of honor. It really does. Was how I listened to a lot of music very early on in life.
I find what's interesting, because you kind of have both ends of kind of that being an instrument, one showing you the musical aspect and one like the DJ aspect of it.
Hey, that's a really good point. I'd never thought of it that way, and certainly you touch on something that became ultimately extremely important to me and very influential in my development, which was listening to favored DJs when I was a teenager, let's say, growing up in Newark, New Jersey, and I was listening to people on WBAI and people on WNEW, and some of these late-night guys and women who just talked and had the freedom to play, whole album sides. So you're absolutely right. The person behind what was coming out, who was curating this soundtrack that kept me company, was very important to me.
It's like, and it's that is a musician in there in a sense, you know what I mean? Like someone who's like curating that, and you kind of are bought into more. It's a performance, a show. You're bought into the personality, why they're choosing this, and you get the history of why they chose it and the history of the song maybe sometimes. So like, what DJs in particular made it seem like, what inspired you to want to do that?
Well, I would say this is not an early DJ, but maybe in the last 20 years. I really liked Delphine Blue, who did a show called Shocking Blue on WBAI. She's now at FUV, which really doesn't have the same freedoms that WBAI had, but I'll always check out Delphine Blue. And then there are two guys at WBAI who I'm having like naturally a senior moment where I can't think of their name. Larry Josephson was someone, and let me just do a quick bit of typing here, early WBAI DJs, because I want to give them credit.
Yeah.
Bob Fass. Okay, so Bob Fass did a show called Radio Unnameable, which was a free-form radio program. And this was back in, like, let's say the late 60s, when there was a lot of political activism going on at the station and all over the country. and protest against, war, and there were civil rights marches. So Bob Fass was an important guy. And let me just scroll down to remember the name of the other two. I said Larry Josephson there. I mean, the names are not quite as important as the fact that I was more influenced by the people at the freeform stations than, let's say, the commercial jocks, or the drive time DJs or people in morning radio. That was not, the commercial radio sound was not appealing to me. And that kind of snappy patter, and where there couldn't be a second of silence, and there was all about, keeping up this sort of fake persona. But that's why these guys like Bob Fass and Larry Josephson were so unique, because they were just themselves. Steve Post. Okay, I just remembered the other name. Steve Post said something that I've always remembered, which is, he was a DJ on BAI. He said, if you can't pronounce something, mumble it with authority.
Yeah, well said.
Right?
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. Mumble it with authority.
Yeah, I mean, it's just if one could go through life with that kind of awkward confidence, I think we'd all be a lot better off.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Than worrying about, let's say, perfection.
And I think, I definitely think we're in a time, and I think phones and technology and just the instant gratification of the internet and things that are available on the internet provide that, if it's not perfect right away, I don't think I can do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of facade of oh, you're not just seeing a video of someone who's practiced that handstand for 15 hours. They just did it. You know what I mean? This kind of so I mumble with authority, I can get behind.
Right. I mean, not that one doesn't seek professionalism.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, one thing I admire about the station I've been with, WPKN, and part of why I've stayed with it, is there's very few people who do not do fairly professional shows. And that's important, even if it's a 10-watt station or a 10,000-watt station. Learn the equipment, do your best to figure out pronunciation ahead of time if you can. If not, you can be honest about it and say, say you're playing this Bulgarian choir, and she says, hey, I'm probably going to mangle the name of it, but here it is. And, it's the music that is the most important thing. But right now I'm pre-producing my shows from home, from a kind of jury-rigged home studio. So you catch me actually in the middle of finishing up the show that will air on Thursday. So my radio show is called The Miniature World, and it airs on WPKN.org and 89.5 FM, et cetera, from 10 a.m. till noon on the first and third Thursdays. So I'm pre-producing, which has really affected my way of doing radio. And I think all of it, to kind of come back to this album that I wound up putting out, had an influence on my songwriting in ways that I wasn't even aware of. Does that make sense?
No, totally. That's I wanted to lead to that, because you see it on both ends. You're getting the finished product and sharing it with people. I'm sure receiving emails all the time to share that with people. So you know it kind of works towards an audience. You know what I mean? And then behind it, trying to learn what to pitch to someone to hope it works for an audience. You know what I mean? It's kind of having. It's
really weird. It's weird. It's kind of magical in a way, how everything came together, because I've always been a writer. I've been writing poetry, and I did a memoir. I've written essays, but I never wrote songs. And to begin that process and to start to think about myself as a kind of producer, and certainly David Barron, who is our producer, who allowed me so generously to collaborate with him, it took my ideas seriously. Like if I felt like I wanted some sort of world percussion sound on the song Hailstorm, and he said, well, Jerry Murata's up here in the Woodstock area where David's studio is. Maybe we can get him. Took it seriously. And every one of those things was respected, and I was just blown away by that whole experience. It gave me confidence that I didn't know I had. Or it I don't know, it sort of acknowledged the knowledge of all those years of knowing how to deal with segues and the kind of music that would make it onto my show, whether it was a very eclectic range, but I knew you know it when you hear it, and it's a kind of it's a hard thing to express, So what's your show like, and what kind of and what genre is this album that you did?
I know
like, so
still...
I had to come up with okay, I guess indie pop, stadium folk, dream pop, piano forward. I don't know. There's kind of a little something for everyone, I hope, on the quiver.
The quiver, sure. No, definitely. Listening into it without reading anything about it, I was like, this is definitely accessible. Like, it's definitely a catchy record. And like a vast, well-recorded record. The musicianship is very tight. The lyrics, the through line, I think, which I'll put a pin in, of the concept of the record, I think is clear and there. And so I would say it's a very accessible record in the best way. So in that sense, I think you knocked it out.
Ooh, thanks. That means a lot. Thank you.
But when it comes to that point where what you just said, trying to determine the genre to feed the algorithm aspect of putting out any music is the worst. And I don't know if you've done.
Well, we're in a very weird time, aren't we?
Yeah.
The indie world is a jungle. So if you're not a marquee name, it's very hard to get reviewed. Yeah. Let alone get people to listen or buy. It's, I don't know what's going on in the culture really with streaming and how that's affecting. I mean, it has to be acknowledged that we didn't even know when creating the actual CD, and we do have physical product as well as digital, are radio stations still accepting CDs? Does anybody, would they prefer to have, digital downloads? And I'm finding it's kind of a mixed bag. Some people only want CDs. Some people only want digital. And then, of course, there's the whole fad, I shouldn't call it that, but, of vinyl coming back, which is what I grew up with. I love vinyl. And I loved reading the back of the album, the liner notes, and that's why we created a booklet for the first edition of the CD that has all the lyrics, a lot of acknowledgments. I love to acknowledge the musicians who worked with me. I love to give people credit where it's due, and there's pictures, there's beautiful artwork, and very proud of that as well. Because there's that auxiliary stuff, that you want to know about a band that you grow to love.
No, yeah, for sure. And that was the only, that's to have it all right there, I think that's the magic of the vinyl, right? Of knowing just a kind of select amount of information, you kind of had to come to your own conclusions based on what you had. And like if their picture wasn't on it, like who's doing, what do these names mean? And like,
well, what do you prefer? You're doing a lot of listening
I do.
And speaking with musicians. What do you prefer?
I don't like. I have a record player, and if I really love a record and I really love a band, I like the vinyl. But just with the like nonstop schedule I have, the only really accessible way is like a download of some sort. A CD that'd be sweet too. I can totally, because like the only bummer about the download is I do a lot of listening while driving. So like with the download, I gotta swipe to the next song, swipe, turn, swipe. And like with the CD, I could just pop it in and play it. So I'd prefer either of those two. Like sound quality wise, I don't really like. I guess I don't personally have a preference with like talking to people and listening to their music, as long as I can hear it before I talk with them.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? That's only happened once. But like, and like, so I guess CD or downloads the way I would prefer to get it. If I lived in a perfect world, I guess vinyl would be the way, and I'd pop on my vinyl. Like,
yeah, for sure. I'd love to have a vinyl of the Quiver. It's a bit expensive to produce, when you don't have like a label behind you, and it takes a while, but maybe someday I'd love to.
So I guess kind of the bounce back and forth with like, with a good radio host, you're feeling the personality, you're feeling the realness of it. Is that what?
Yeah.
Now, do you find the same thing with a good musician for yourself?
What a great question. When there's passion that comes through the music, the genre doesn't really matter as much to me, although there are certain genres that I just don't really, resonate with. But I can like everything from, electronic dance music to Celtic music to, world music to indie pop to synthesizer stuff. But I suppose when it comes to singer-songwriter, where there's more direct experience of the personality, I want to feel they're being authentic. I don't know if that makes any sense, because there are many musicians that are superb technically, but it's cold maybe. So one of the things that struck me when Tartie, my collaborator in Australia, sent me her music to consider to play on my show was I felt her humanity, and I felt her warmth.
So that, because like I remember it was I'm trying to winter.
Oh,
I'm trying to remember
Girl.
Winter's Girl.
You were close.
I was so close.
Yeah, her song Winter's Girl in particular, which listeners can find. Tartie, does her own stuff, has been working as a musician, songwriter for quite a while, and will probably be releasing more of her own incredible songs. And so if they want to look up on YouTube Winter's Girl, that was my first introduction to someone who became incredibly important in my life. To have a collaborator who is, to a large extent, putting music to my lyrics. That is just, and the fact that it seems to be working for people, like what you said, like it's accessible, and also, just it seems to move people. Like I think they do feel the universality of some of the themes, like early first love, first heartbreak, concern for the environment, all kinds of things that Tartie and I, though over 10,000 miles apart and very different in age, we share. We bridge that gap, all those gaps. And it was, these several years, which included the pandemic, of working with her remotely has been just absolutely thrilling. I was able to go up to the studio in Woodstock, and work with the producer near Woodstock, but and his musicians that I sat with and gave input to. I mean, the whole thing's so amazing to me that I can hear the surprise still in my voice. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
no,
like,
that's beautiful.
How did this happen? It was an unexpected turn in my life at a later age that has been, just an astonishing experience.
Well, and I gotta imagine too, just on the radio end of it, sharing like music that you find so moving and like holds a certain bar, right? To like, I gotta imagine there was maybe a little bit of like, it had to be a little nerve-wracking to kind of like go into making music, because you're like, I know what the people I hang out with say about stuff they don't like. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, that's interesting.
Like,
well, I think, what, somebody that I respect, I'm trying to think, I think it's, Ira Glass of NPR,
mm-hmm.
Yes. Who does,
Yeah.
Other stuff. He said something about, I think it's him, the reason you work so hard and so long, the people who get anywhere, let's put it that way, is taste level. The reason you're rarely satisfied with what you do is that your taste level is excruciatingly high. And I would say that's what was always with me, because it's very much with me when I'm putting together a radio show. Even when it comes to the audio quality, like I find that a lot of stations over-compress the sound these days, and even my beloved station has taken to doing that for loudness or something. And if I use a digital audio workstation like Audacity to put things together. If something looks like a giant just chunk of blue, I know it's going to sound terrible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In terms of the form on the track. And I like some dynamic sort of range to come through. And yeah, definitely nerve-wracking. I mean, and if I would come home from Woodstock, probably about a 2-hour drive to where I live in Connecticut, with a rough mix of one of the songs on the album, The Quiver, that we just did, with, say, we put together some tracks, and then we had Tartie's voice, behind them, or that she would send again after she heard the latest mix. At any rate, they say, don't listen for 3 days because you're going to hate it. And, I mean, a lot of, really accomplished musicians have told me that. And that would happen occasionally, more often because I was so in sync with what David wanted to do and the other musicians. It would be like, oh, my God, this is great. But I want, I want a snare drum here, or I want, some backing vocals for her. I want this, I want that. But occasionally driving home, I'd be like, it's ruined. It's just ruined. And then, you wait a couple of days, you listen again. It's like, this isn't so bad. It's a funny thing.
No, I totally relate to that, because I do the same thing when I leave the studio and I'm driving home.
Yeah.
And I listen to what we did 20 minutes ago, like in the car, and I'm like, yeah, no, I can still hear I breathed weird there, and like I didn't mumble with authority here, like.
Right.
And then 3 days later, like, and I admire the guy behind like, and that's why I think it's so important with working with other people, because the guy who's producing it, at least the guy I work with, He's really good at being, no, it's fine. That'll do. No, why? Why do you want?
Because they know, right?
Right.
They know.
Yeah.
Yeah. They know. They know. It's a magical and sort of very fastidious scientific realm. It's both. It's both. What kind of music does your band do?
So you're kind of singer-songwriter with funk, punk, reggae, rock style stuff. I'll send you stuff if you're interested.
Oh, sure. I'm always happy to hear stuff.
All right, cool. I would love it. But yeah, in like a lot of at least the live performance, and on the record too, it's a lot of acoustic guitars ran through Marshall amps, which is strange to like. It doesn't sound like anything different on the record, but in the live performance is different.
Wait, did you just say acoustic guitars run through a Marshall amp?
Yeah.
Wait, I'm missing something here. Do you mean the kind of acoustic guitars that also have an electric output?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I understand. Okay.
So it's getting that full body sound, but it's a.
Oh, that sounds interesting, actually, to me, anyway.
Sweet. Well, I'll definitely send you some stuff when we're done chatting here, and I appreciate any feedback. But I guess so. With the initial email, like, did Tartie seem like just more welcoming to like, because to pitch someone like your lyrics, that's a lot of trust. You know what I mean? Because like I feel like lyrics. Especially being a DJ and hearing music and then kind of writing poetry and a memoir and like working on different types of writing before, I think almost sometimes songs get this like pedestal in that sense of like kind of like a different type of like perfected poetry. And like, so there's definitely like I believe like a confidence within what you write to want to send it to somebody, but also it's vulnerable in that sense that you need to feel welcome that this person wants to hear it or like, you know what I mean? Like, so through the initial email, was there that kind of sense of relationship?
I can so relate to every aspect of everything that you just said. It's a little bit inscrutable, a little unknowable to me in a way, some elements of this whole collaboration, in that I get a lot of submissions of people wanting airtime. And I try to listen. I don't really like you, we don't have the time to listen to everything. And also you can tell, I'm not going to probably play heavy metal or Christian rock on my show. But her note to me, it's not that she said anything so remarkable. She just said, I'm wondering if you would, I've heard your show, I'm in it. Something made me check out her stuff. I don't even remember what it was. But to get to your other point, because of what she did in her songs and the passion and humanity, a couple of times in my life, things have taken a turn because I've made a bold move, and it felt like a bold move, but it felt safe. Maybe because we'd been talking, we'd been emailing. She was warm, receptive, interesting woman. I had been starting to write what I hoped were songs, but I like the way you said a perfected poem, because I had to start figuring out what the difference between a poem and a song was. Is there a difference? So when I wrote to her, it was with tremendous trepidation, but somehow I felt safe to say, I've written a few things. Would you consider taking a look? Could these be songs? And she was very open. I can say she was very open. And it happened sort of quickly that of the few songs I sent, I actually did send her a few. she picked Orchard. And although it was not my first attempt, I think beyond that horrible medieval mistake from when I was 13 or whatever, I had written a longer song, which I want to get produced, called My Last Bad Boy. And she liked it, but she said there's a lot of words here. And it's true, it's much wordier. So I think I'd have trouble with that. It's just not the way she prefers to work. And so she took Orchard, which is also about, like a bad boy in a way. And she worked with it. And she has at her home in Australia, an electronic keyboard. And sent me a demo. I was just like on the floor. It was so right. And she loved it, and I loved it, and we went from there. And then the songs just kept going. Yes, I was very unnerved by the whole thing. It's not like it was casually like I'm going to bring my music to the producer of the National or something and say, would you give a list? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
Like I'd never approached anybody in that end of the music industry. And I had gotten some guidance from a local composer who I respect a lot, who I'm hoping will work with me again, because he did a version of My Last Bad Boy. And even though it's a gender bender because he sings it, he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot just in working on it. And then I went on to get really involved with Tartie. And most of the songs were more appropriate to be sung by a female. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, for sure. Because like I've heard because there's a magic within email. I feel like there's, ever since I've started personally reaching out via email, I'm like, wow, it's crazy how this world can be connected in a way that's not publicly like thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like you can actually kind of communicate with certain people. And like I just coming from someone who spends a lot of time writing songs and trying to write songs, and like I've never and I've thought about it, but I've never done like the aspect of sending something for someone else. I've always been like, this is how I write, and trying to learn how other people work. So I find it fascinating that sending a set of lyrics to somebody, and, you know what I mean, like, and that trust within the what they turn back, or how it comes back, and like I guess so with Orchard in particular, because I have a couple questions from what you just said, but with Orchard, like the formation of the song, like as the song when Tartie sent it back, like the chorus being the chorus, like. Did you write it like that? Was those lines? Did she repeat certain lines that she found would work for a chorus, or did you write those particular lines multiple times as if they were a chorus?
That's a good question. I'm actually looking at the lyrics right now to remind myself. I wrote it pretty much as it came out.
Okay. So it had that song structure.
Yeah, but you know what? I didn't write it with a structure of a song in mind because I've never really studied music theory or music composition, and I certainly don't write my stuff with any kind of adherence to, chorus, verse, bridge,
Yeah.
Although I've learned more how that can be very, very useful. But most of it was as it appeared on the page as a poem, except that when I was working on her demo with the producer over phone, email, and a program that he had where we could listen to stuff simultaneously without any delay, all these technological kinds of things, it occurred to me that the song had to start differently. So the song now does start, let all the fruits fall down. And it had started with moving through the orchard. You strode through the grove. And that just didn't seem like the right beginning. Once we started putting, we got some cello in there and we got some instrumentation going on. I needed something grabbier to start. So the structure changed.
Gotcha.
And then basically that one, I would say, was very much like the way it first came out.
Okay. But I think that, well, I guess compared to the other one that was more wordy and more of a story, because that, as far as like trying to write a melody and stuff to that gets to be hard when there's a lot of lyrics. But I do think like lyric writing is like in its own sense its own world compared to like theory and using song structure. I think they collide. That is the editing process, and it sounds like that's what it was for you.
Well, I like that you said that because it gives me a sense of freedom, that if it is its own world, maybe it's a world I can live in. Because I don't know how I feel about those other styles of working. Like, I don't know that you have to have a bridge all the time.
No, I don't think you have to.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm not even sure I know what a bridge is. I feel kind of embarrassed admitting that. But, I guess I could come up with some sort of fancy explanation for it if I had to. But it feels like a kind of imposition. On the other hand, having written poetry that you would call more free verse, you know how, like, in the history of, like, American and British literature and all that, there were a lot of forms, sonnets and ballads and all that, and rhyme schemes and so forth. But when Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson came along, and they were using free verse, and that became, in other words, it didn't have to rhyme, for one thing. It really had an effect on modern and postmodern poetry and stuff like that. So, point being, the attempt to rhyme became very helpful. I don't know if you find that in your writing, but it has sort of reined me in a way that I think is probably useful for a songwriter. Just a little bit, like just giving me the outline in a sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like the cadence of a chord progression, you can say would be the rhyme, the resolve. Okay, this is where that whole passage comes together. Like when you
and some of it's funny. I'm looking at it now. I'm looking at some of my lyrics. Some things there's a sort of every other line rhyming, and then there are some songs like in Sky Ocean where it's like, you made a deal with the sky, I made a deal with the ocean. You knew that you had to fly. Okay, so fly and sky have a link, but then that next line, I was down deep thinking of her, is not connected to any other line before it.
Yeah.
It connects more to the next stanza, just the girl that I used to be, tried to hang on to your feathers. But they're not rhyming. I don't know, I guess I'm trying to deal more with images, symbolism, thoughts, ideas, things that evoke a feeling state.
Well, yeah, and like the music in that sense can kind of resolve that passage too. Like, songwriting is a really interesting. Like, the last few years I've been reading a lot of books on it. Like,
really?
Yeah. There's this guy, Patterson, Pat Patterson. He's got some real good, just like books on songwriting, and like another person I've been reading is Andre Slope. And just like, and they're not BW, Berkeley. They're Berkeley professors, and and it's just really interesting. Like, all these different kind of perspectives of like how this works. And like when it comes down to it, it's kind of like a mix of whatever, you know what I mean? And then having this outlet to talk to people like you and talk to other people and see how their brains work with songwriting. And it's really, really interesting to like, to just knowing that there is tools, but also none of it matters. But in a weird way, we kind of fall into those tools anyway. You know what I mean? Like having it.
Well, you know what else, David? I think that when one becomes vulnerable to or open to collaboration, I am sure that Tartie, with all her knowledge of songwriting, applied a lot of what she knew had to happen, if you know what I mean, or would be better if it happened to the lyrics. Now, there are a couple of songs on the album Quiver that I wrote both the lyrics and the music. And there's a couple of songs where she wrote the lyrics and the music. Then there's a couple of songs where I wrote the lyrics, she wrote the music. You get what I'm saying? So I gave myself permission to try to write. So the ones that I wrote both would be Dilemma and Sky Ocean. She helped me with part of that. And I think that's where it comes together. I think that's what you just said, actually, which is that the people doing the musicality part are forming it. There's a guy I really like to mostly watch on YouTube, Rick Beato.
Yeah.
Oh my God! So like when he takes apart a song, then I realize how little I know. I know nothing. You know, like I'm a big fan of Joni Mitchell, and I think she's influenced a lot of our stuff, both for Tartie and me. And when he takes apart her song Amelia, which he thinks is one of the best songs ever written, as do I, he's really doing like a full analysis of the rhythm, the dominant chord, the augmented seventh, and how they fit together is just amazing.
It is,
like sort of he's trying to explain why it works in the powerful way that it resonates, sort of with the ears and the heart. It's no accident.
Definitely. It's definitely like, I mean, it could have come together in a strange accidental way, but like the end product is not an accident. Like, like everything she said is and recorded and played is what she meant to record and play in that moment. Had she even, because she, Joni uses those weird open tunings and but yeah, no, that's definitely, there sparks in my brain when I listen to stuff like that. I love diving into like song analysis stuff like that. So yeah, that's a good.
You know what I'm kind of nervous about is that the album's out. I'm trying to promote it, and I'm also, thank God, starting to get the inspiration to write some new material. I mean, there are still songs separate from the album, The Quiver, that are kind of waiting to be produced. And, some of them I actually shared with Mike Watt because one of his rules for interviews was, he has many rules, was that you give him 13 pieces of music and only like 3 can be from your album.
Huh.
So I had a couple of demos of things I was working on with a couple of other musicians from songs that have yet to be produced, right? So I'm nervous that the more I learn that it's going to start to freak me out. Because I was so naive when this all came out, and the collaboration was so pure, and just, at least it felt that way. Like no one was imposing anything on us. We were free range, you know, and I don't know whether a little knowledge is going to help me or whether I'm going to need a lot of knowledge now. Does that make sense?
No, I totally relate to that. Like, I felt that when I started studying theory, because I would go to play at Mike nights. My dad would take me when I was in like middle school to bars to go to Mike nights and stuff. And like,
oh, wow.
And like I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew if you followed your ear right, you'd figure it out. And like, I kind of had some apprehension about learning like theory. I'm like, maybe it takes away the magic of it, you know, like, so if I'd learn exactly why this works, maybe, you know, but also, I ended up just diving into it. And I realized the guys that say they don't know what they're doing, they know what they're doing. like the theory,
oh, that's interesting.
You know,
yeah.
the theory, like Jimi Hendrix knows what key he's in. He knows what chords he's playing.
right.
Maybe he can't read music, and maybe he doesn't, you know, care about like Neapolitan 6 chords, and like, but neither do I. And like, but I think it became, at first it was very like, it was a lot. It was a lot, and like it became very like that kind of fear of like, oh, I don't know this stuff. Maybe if I spend too much time trying to figure this out, I'll forget the feeling of stuff. But I found that in the end of it, it ended up being more tools towards that kind of freedom you had before. So I think,
well, that's heartening to hear you say that. I'm going to go with that hope that they will be tools. Yeah.
I think. Well, I definitely like. Because, like, I think creativity, it's its own practice, right? And then, like, kind of tools and learning techniques it's a separate practice. So, like, the beauty and the aha moment is when the creativity can kind of connect with the tool you have, right? If it's, like, learning, I don't know, writing in sonnets or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, learning with the song structure or using a bridge in a different way, like... or stacking the song in a emotion type of context, where like every time you hear the chorus, it makes it heavier because of the verse that came before, you know, stuff like that. Like I found that those were more tools, and like that, like it didn't take away the creative nonsensical aspect I practiced all the time, but it rather helped edit those like later. And like, so the magic didn't go. I just had a different thing to craft it with.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
So I don't know. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the other question I had kind of on that was, are any of these bad boy tunes referring to the Lanky Boys from from earlier?
You are, what is it? You are mischievous. Oh yeah. I think we all have, or most people have, someone or something that has kind of haunted us throughout our lives that, you know, has some kind of resonance or something. I mean, I chose to go deep into the past to come up with this, with many of the songs on this album. Not all of them. But I chose to go there. I chose to throw myself back to when I was 16. And, you know, the Lanky Boys were coming around with their guitars and, you know, breaking my heart and all that. And I wanted to figure out why I was so haunted. And I think I wanted to become liberated from the tyranny of the heartbreak.
Yeah.
And people might say, like, oh, my God, like, you're an adult woman, like, you're still pining over that. Well, maybe. Pining over something. And that's what I ultimately figured out, was that it has to do a lot of the themes with loss of innocence, loss of potential, loss of time, being able to recover and be strong, things that I think a lot of people of many ages can relate to. You know, yeah. Am I done with the lanky boys? I mean, the bad boys? I hope so.
Well,
I mean, I think my husband hopes so. I mean, you know, okay, not to suggest anything, you know, like peculiar, but he supported me fully. He's a musician also, and had a show at WPKN. It's where we met. And I mean, he's not a lanky boy. He's a man with integrity. So I rid myself of that cycle, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I think in my memory, I had to do some sweeping up and trying to figure out. So, I mean, I actually, no one's really asked me about this part except you. So I'll give you this little tidbit. Before I wrote the songs, I did a 6-episode audio memoir that is up on the internet called 10daysinnewark.com, 10 Days in Newark. And it involved reconnecting with those people that left such a confused void in me.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, not in person, not all of them in person, but by phone and so forth. I wrote some music for it. Actually, I play guitar on the podcast. We call it a podcast, but it's not really the typical. And so I connected with a bunch of people to try to deeply, deeply remember and have them help me remember that era. I think it had a lot to do with the era of the late 60s. That was certainly powerful for most people that lived through it.
Was that power a quiver?
I'm taking my time to think about that. Let me think. There was a yes and no. Yes, in the following way. The quiver is a kind of shivering feeling of recognition and joy. And in the late 60s, early 70s, let's say walking on the streets of Boston where I first went to school, if you saw another, quote, hippie, it's a word you don't hear much anymore, but someone with, like, you know, long-haired guys or woman in a tie-dye shirt, it sounds corny and simplistic, but there was a nod you would give each other. You know, it was almost as if you were saying, like, yeah, peace, baby, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what we want. We are joined in some communal hope for the world that was both political and personal. And there was a incredible thrill, you know, for like a 17, 18-year-old girl that I was, going out into this world from being in a pretty sheltered environment in Newark, and seeing the wider world of people who were, quote, you know, freaks like me, who liked the kind of music I liked, to come back full circle, who were listening to Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and ultimately Mothers of Invention and Cream and Jefferson Airplane. And that was the link, that was the quiver. It would be a very, maybe, you know, half a second quiver, but it was there.
Yeah.
And this is not to over-romanticize that era. It had a lot of problems. There was a lot of dark stuff. We know this. But it was pretty powerful.
Right. And well, and it's your experience of connecting with somebody It's that knowing that, oh, you have the same band shirt in a way, like, yes, I was at that show, or you know what I mean, or like, there's an excitement, a spark of like instant community, even though all that matters is just that, like, I see you, heard, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's, music is a language. And so it's a kind of language that is more anarchic, chaotic, doesn't have to be formed as precisely as human conversation. And you don't even have to be in the same room with someone to be sharing it. If I know that, you like this band and I like this band and we refer to a particular song or a particular album, it's something that we now share about each other. Yeah. We may not know much else, but we know that.
The Blood on the Tracks is a good record, and like you've both spent time listening to that record, or fill in the blank. Like,
yeah. Hey, it's funny you should mention that album, because last night I had it in mind to hear an early Bob Dylan song, so I asked my Echo Dot to play it, and it was Baby Let Me Follow You Down by Dylan, very early Dylan. And then I remembered how his voice started to change, and so I bumped up to If Not For You by Dylan. And then Lay Lady Lay, the crooner Dylan.
Yeah.
And just trying to figure out, like, why did he, stuff like that. And so I was able to make my own little, like, radio show in my bed, while listening to the speaker. Like, I want to hear those 3 songs. I want to hear those in a row. I want to hear how he changed his voice. This morning, in finishing up my radio show for this week, I came upon a song. I'm a big Kate Bush fan. And a song I'd never heard before that she sings on, by an album with a guy I didn't know much about called Roy Harper, who did some playing with people from Pink Floyd, and like an influential British songwriter. And there's a song on one of his albums that has her doing background vocals, and David Gilmour is also singing background vocals. And what does that link to? David Gilmour just released a new album,
right?
Which I'm playing a couple of cuts on my show on Thursday. It's just very exciting to me.
No,
and then I go and do never ending.
Yeah.
And then I go and do a deep dive into Roy Harper to find out more about him and the background vocals he did on a song of Kate Bush's, and back and forth and back and forth. And I guess it's all about all these people collaborating and connecting and creating some kind of resonance with each other. Maybe someday I'll actually have a band. In other words, like the life of a songwriter, the lyricist is very lonely. I don't really have my collaborators nearby.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, that's the phenomenon of this project, is that we're all remote. Jeff Pivar, even, who did such great guitar work on the album at my request, is in Oregon. So I need some Connecticut people, or a little bit closer.
Was it? Well, I think by doing what you're doing now and having it established, having something that it's easier to, like, this is what I'm working for. Before it not existing, it only can be easier in that sense. And like on one more just bit to refer to the kind of concept of the record, I would argue that those little connections like that within, like, those mind synapses of putting together puzzle pieces and finding other people's whole entire careers and lives available out of one little backing vocal, I'd kind of argue that would probably be a quiver.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot, and I love that you're sort of taking off now with your own association to the quiver. You know, like
well, that's
it's a movement now, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of like any, like, I think album, piece of work, poetry, anything it's kind of like the artist and writer's intentions, but also how that resonates with you and how you apply it, you know, and like your ability to incorporate that philosophy or that in what you encounter, because everyone's existence and experience is going to be different, but the one thing that can be a common point is that intrusive positive thought or influential thought, right? And I think what you guys are doing with the quiver, it inspires that, and I really appreciate you taking time twice to talk to me, Bernie. This has been awesome, and and I guess before kind of wrapping it, to kind of wrap it up here, the record comes out full. Is it fully out yet, or does it come out?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually been out for a number of months.
Okay.
So it's available inthestrees.bandcamp.com. Of course, we like to push Bandcamp because one gets maybe 2 pennies rather than 1 penny.
Yeah.
It's not about the money, obviously, but because there isn't any. But but it's out, and you can also, you can purchase it as a CD. I have a new shipment. My house is like a warehouse, and
tell me about it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's crazy. And inthestrees.com, the website, which I need to update, and I feel bad about that, has a lot of information, little backstory, and has about 5 of the videos that we've produced. Also, some wonderful videos that go with the songs, and they're on YouTube, they're on the website, and we'll be releasing more of them, and we'll also release more singles from the album. But it is definitely gettable. In These Trees and Tartie is the full name of the group, and the name of the album, our debut, is The Quiver.
Beautiful.
Oh, I said that just like a radio person.
You did. I expected,
I'm sorry, I slipped into.
No, I expected that.
I'm really sorry. And you're listening to Zig at the Gig.
Yeah, very good. Awesome. Well, I hope to be talking with you again when you guys kind of craft these new tunes. And I'll be excited to hear like what tools you fall into. So I'll be looking forward to the next record and when we can chat again.
Thank you. Oh, lovely. And thank you so much for being supportive. And it was very interesting to talk to you.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.